Imagine for a moment just the incredible power, the power of a single person's ideas. Not like armies or big political movements, just a thought, an idea, but one that catches fire and, well, sparks a revolution, changes history for centuries. That kind of world-altering impact, that's exactly what we're digging into today. We are diving into Will and Ariel Durant's Rousseau and Revolution. It won a Pulitzer Prize, and it's not just any old history book. It's the 10th volume, believe it or not, of their huge work, The Story of Civilization. This one covers a really crucial time in Europe, 1756 up to 1789, right up to the French Revolution, basically. And the person guiding us through it all, Jean-Jacques Rousseau.
Yeah, and what's really interesting, I think, beyond just the history itself, is how they wrote it. People often call this book a masterful rhetorical achievement. Seriously, the Durants, they somehow took this incredibly complex history and made it not just understandable, but really like gripping, compelling.
Yeah.
So our mission today really is to unpack how they pulled that off.
Yeah.
How did they make this dense, complicated period meaningful for the average reader?
Yeah.
For what they call the common man.
Right. And just so you know, as you're listening, you are experiencing a unique two-host conversation. It's powered by some advanced analytical tools designed for a deeper, more dynamic kind of book analysis. Okay, so let's start with the authors. The Durants, Will, and Ariel. They weren't just historians. They were, well, pretty famous American writers, philosophers, too. They spent 50 years, 5 decades, crafting that 11-volume story of civilization. I mean, the commitment alone is astounding. They got awards, the Presidential Medal of Freedom even, but how did they build that trust with readers, that deep connection?
That's such a key point. Their work, all those volumes, it really built up their ethos, their credibility, decades of research, of putting it all together, synthesizing massive amounts of information.
Yeah.
It made people see them as, well, trustworthy guides through this huge sweep of history. It wasn't just a hobby. This was their life's work. You could feel that dedication and that sheer scale, the consistency. It just showed a command of the subject that, frankly, few could match. People trusted that.
Absolutely. And then Rousseau and Revolution specifically wins the Pulitzer Prize for General Nonfiction in '68. That's not just a pat on the back, is it? It's like this huge public stamp of approval. Yeah. Validation, saying, yeah, this isn't just good history, it's history told in a way that's special, accessible, groundbreaking even. It really highlighted their style, making complex stuff easy to grasp without, dumbing it down. And that totally fit their goal, right? To popularize history, open it up beyond the academics. They showed you could be deep and readable.
Yeah, they really threaded that needle.
Okay, let's talk about the historical setting for a minute. Rousseau and Revolution covers, 1756 to 1789, from the 7 Years' War right up to the French Revolution brewing. This was a time of just massive change, ideas flying around, society shifting underfoot. What makes this particular period so key in their whole big story?
Well, if you think about the whole Story of Civilization project, this book comes near the very end. It's volume 10. So it kind of feels like a culmination, doesn't it? A sort of crescendo after decades of work leading up to this huge turning point in history. It's the bridge to the modern world, in a way. The ideas they've been tracking for ages were about to explode.
And we have to keep remembering who they were writing for. They said it themselves, the common man, the general reader, not academics. So this audience, you listening, they wanted what? Good stories, right? Vivid characters, a clear picture of what happened, more than, say, dense scholarly arguments. What did that mean for how the Durants wrote?
Right. So what was their main goal? I'd say it was twofold, really. To inform, yes, but also to entertain. They weren't just listing facts. They were weaving it all together, philosophy, politics, art, culture, into a story that made sense and was actually interesting to read. Their aim, they said, was to unify and humanize the great body of historical knowledge.
Yeah.
And make it relevant, make it feel alive, show how the past connects to now. They knew, I think, that to get people reading history, it had to be a bit of a page-turner.
Okay, so at the absolute center of this story is Rousseau, Jean-Jacques Rousseau. His life, his ideas, his influence, that's the core. But the book also gives you this wide view, this panorama of his time. Figures like Voltaire, Goethe, Kant. It's a rich picture of the Enlightenment. How did they manage to make Rousseau the focus of such a big story, and how did they make him so compelling?
That's a great question. It really gets to their use of pathos, the appeal to emotion. That was, I'd argue, their main tool, their primary strategy. Instead of just dry facts and dates, they zeroed in on the human stuff, the personalities, the arguments, the successes, the failures of these big figures. They knew that to make history stick, you had to make people feel it, make it personal.
So it wasn't just about Rousseau's theories, but about his life, how his experiences maybe shaped those ideas.
Exactly right. The whole book kind of pivots around his really passionate writing. on liberty, equality, how society corrupts people. Think about the noble savage idea or his arguments in The Social Contract. The Durants didn't just lay out the theories. They put them in the context of his life, his crazy, tumultuous life, his friendships, his big fallings out, his moments of genius and despair. That gives the whole thing this dramatic, emotional core. You feel the ideas through his personal journey. It makes his philosophy less abstract, more empathetic. You connect with the person. The grounded huge historical changes in these individual stories, making it all feel very human.
Yeah, they really painted this vivid tapestry, didn't they? By putting these figures side by side. Like, you've got Rousseau, all about feeling and intuition, and then you've got Voltaire, Mr. Cool Rationality. It wasn't just an intellectual disagreement on paper, was it? It felt more personal.
Oh, definitely. They didn't just say, here's what Rousseau thought, here's what Voltaire thought. They showed the rivalry, the arguments, the clashes, how these different ways of seeing the world played out between actual people. Rousseau argues man is naturally good. Society messes him up. Voltaire might shoot back with some sarcastic, witty put-down. The Durants capture that tension, the human drama behind the big ideas. It makes the whole Enlightenment debate feel immediate, alive. It's brilliant storytelling, really.
It really is. And as we get into these deep historical currents, these intense human stories, sometimes you just need a moment to pause and reflect. That's actually what we try to do with Mindful Moments. It's over on our YouTube channel. We use AI book analysis there too, aiming to spark a bit more reflection, a bit more rational thought beyond just the story.
That makes sense. Because while the Durants were masters of emotion, of pathos, the book also has a really strong logical structure underneath it all, logos. They organized everything chronologically, very carefully. They traced how the ideas, the events, the people, how it all connected and built up toward the French Revolution. They're building a case, step by step, showing how Enlightenment thinking, especially Rousseau's, seeped into society and paved the way. I mean, look at their summary of the revolution's causes. People always quote this bit. The essence of the French Revolution was the overthrow of nobility and the clergy by a bourgeoisie. Quote, using the discontent of the peasants to destroy feudalism and the discontent of urban masses to neutralize the armies of the king. That ability to just boil down huge amounts of complex social structures, economics, philosophy into a clear, logical argument, that's a major strength. That's incredible synthesis.
Okay, but it's true, isn't it, that some academic historians might say, well, it's not quite rigorous enough on causation. Like maybe it doesn't dig into the archives the way a modern academic might or engage with all the scholarly debates. Is that criticism fair, considering what they were trying to do?
Well, it's fair from a purely academic standpoint, maybe. But I think it kind of misses the point of this book. Yeah. The Durant's logic wasn't about satisfying historiographical trends. It was about creating a holistic story that made sense to a general reader. They were brilliant at showing how ideas, Rousseau's ideas, others' ideas, weren't just things discussed in fancy rooms. They showed how these ideas spread, how they changed how people thought about power, about fairness, and how that ultimately provided the sort of ideological gunpowder for the revolution, that connection ideas leading to action. That's the core logical argument, and they make it incredibly clear and accessible.
So, pulling it all together then, what about the book's impact, its legacy? It was a huge bestseller, praised for its writing. Its rhetorical power clearly worked, right? It made this really pivotal, complex time in history understandable, even fascinating for millions.
Absolutely. Yeah. Its success comes down to that audience appropriateness, as we mentioned. The style, the focus on people, the eloquence, the way they synthesized everything. It was perfectly tuned for that general audience. People call it history for travelers and readers. It gives you the context, the meaning, without needing a PhD. They really managed to open up this incredibly rich period for everyone.
And that brings us to maybe an ethical point, or at least a point about their honesty. They were always upfront, weren't they? This is popular history. It's about synthesis and storytelling, not digging up new facts from archives. They weren't pretending to be writing academic monographs.
No, not at all. And that was a very conscious choice, totally aligned with their goal. They weren't writing for other professors. They were writing for everybody else. To democratize history, you could say. They understood that for history to really reach people, it had to be welcoming, not intimidating. Their legacy, maybe, is as these master storytellers who just wanted to share the grand story of civilization with as many people as possible. So maybe a final thought for you, listening to all this. How can understanding the way historians like the Durants use rhetoric, how they tell stories, appeal to emotion, build arguments, how can that help us? Not just with history books, but with understanding complex things today in this, flood of information we live in. Think about how narratives are constructed, how emotions are used, how logic is presented to convince us of things. every single day?
That's a really good question to chew on, and it underlines the value of what the Durants did in Rousseau and Revolution. For more stuff like this, more thought-provoking content, definitely check out Mindful Moments and our other podcasts. And hey, click the link you see on screen now for an in-depth book summary of Rousseau and Revolution. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't. Share this with anyone you think might find it interesting. And if you want to grab the book itself, there's a purchase link there too. And most importantly, keep thinking critically.